Hi, my name is Rachel Bernstein. I'm very excited to share the research that I've been working on throughout the semester. My topic is navigating pregnancy during the COVID-19 pandemic and analyzing metaphors of women's experiences through that. This study was led by Dr. Haley Horstman, and I basically got to work on the results section and findings of the study from the interviews. So a little bit of background on the study is women were given the chance through interviews to share their experiences of being pregnant during a pandemic. They got to talk about their struggles that they faced while being pregnant and some of the methods that they were able to use to cope with it. I analyzed the transcriptions and I got to find different themes throughout um, different commonalities of themes that women used throughout the study and got to really look at the metaphors that they used to express their emotions. So the sample was conducted from 21 women of various different backgrounds, and they're all asked the same question of what is a metaphor that describes being pregnant during a global pandemic. I also was able to analyze naturally occurring metaphors that they just happened to use to describe their experiences during. So we're going to look at how women answered that question and some of the naturally occurring metaphors that they used. So to start with my first set of findings, it's metaphors that described what it's like to be pregnant during COVID-19. Some common themes that occurred were uncertainty, change, and struggling, and how the women dealt with this. So, to start with uncertainty, it came from the current unknowns and the future unknowns that the women were worried about. So, to start off with, a lot of women talked about comparing pregnancy to traveling because when you travel, you're not really sure what's going to happen. Things can take different twists and turns. So Valerie mentions it's like you're planning for a European trip, your flight's canceled, you lose your passport, there's all these restrictions. You plan the trip, but things are getting in the way. Chelsea kind of describes it as going to a foreign country without an interpreter. So just being in complete unknown waters and not knowing what's coming. Another common sub-theme of uncertainty is feeling lost. So Isabella says it's like rowing upstream in the dark. It's really hard and you just don't know what's coming next. So that was more of like a physical feeling lost, but it was also described as the emoji of a girl smacking herself in the face, is how Becca described it, that you just don't know what's happening and you're lost and you're not sure where to go next. So next, looking at change, when you plan a pregnancy, you have a whole list of things that you're going to do, and the pandemic brought about a lot of change, whether it was change in healthcare protocols, just change in life in general. And some of the women were really able to accept this change and embrace it, and some resisted the change and it was really hard for them to deal with. So Lizzie compares it to breaking a coconut, and inside it can be sweet water or it can be more bitter. But she describes how whatever she has, she's going to make it work. If it's not sweet, she says she's going to make coconut rice with it. However, Sarah more so resisted the change and said it's like a really big performance that she'd been preparing for, but then no one's there to actually see it. Um, Also resisting, Nanine compares it being hit by a dodgeball, or like planning meals and going to the store and you only get to buy half of what you were planning on buying. So the change is just like can come in positive or negative forms. So looking at struggling, a lot of the women were struggling with trying to figure out how to either protect their baby, to protect themselves. How are they going to change their lifestyle with COVID, but still keep the baby safe? They felt like it was a very chaotic situation overall. Gina says it's kind of like going Black Friday shopping, or Serene says it's like you're grounded and you can't leave the house. Shelby mentions it's like you're in a bubble. And she says it's like you can't do anything or go anywhere, but you also don't necessarily want to do anything or go anywhere because you're trying to keep your baby safe. So struggling with the balance of how am I going to handle this pandemic and what am I going to do with it? So that was the first set of findings. Now the second one, these are from naturally occurring metaphors that the women just happened to use when they were talking that I picked up in the interviews. And they used metaphors of coping with pregnancy during a pandemic. So I'm going to start off with talking about stress. The women talk about the stress naturally, and then next I'm going to talk about resilience. And these women really took the stress in and then talked about different ways that they were able to cope with that stress and how they were resilient and how they fought through it. So to begin with stress, Becca says that nothing is set in stone. So there was no set birth plan. The women a lot of the time we're talking about they were feeling stressed about their birth plan because at first you could have 3 people in the room, then you could have 1 person. At first you could have your husband come to appointments with you, and then you couldn't have your husband come to appointments with you. Tina said that going to the doctor was like a robotic experience because it was almost like the doctor didn't actually want to touch her. She couldn't really get what she needed out of them because they were so socially distanced and kind of cut out with appointments. Nanine kind of says it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. She had a situation where she was working and she decided she couldn't work anymore because she just couldn't deal with the fact that she could possibly be on a ventilator due to COVID. So the women, to overcome the stress that they were feeling and to be resilient throughout that, a lot of them talked about using support. And there's more sub-themes on the next slide. But to start off with its support, they felt like they got a lot of support from their families and from their husband or just their partner, even from far away if they couldn't physically be with their family in person. So Terry describes her mother as being the nourisher, and she took care of her, even though they weren't physically together. And then Chelsea says that her and her husband were a really strong team. So they really got through it together by being a team. Other women used religion as a way to cope with pregnancy and the pandemic and getting through it. So Terry says that they've definitely grounded me with my faith. And she doesn't know how she could have gotten through this experience without having her faith. And in addition, it's like she had a support group that got her through it. So it's more of just like the support combined with religion. Another quote for religion, Grace says, a man came up to her in a store and he said, a child gives him hope to go on. So even though this pandemic has been so horrible, just the thought of a baby coming into the world gave him hope. And she said that really stuck with her, saying that. In addition, the women talk about overcoming different challenges. So Chelsea says that, but I really found out that there's nothing that a human can't do if they're pushed up against the wall. And in addition to that, Lizzie says that it's more like a lemon. So making lemonade out of having a lemon. And Shani talks about there being a light at the end of the tunnel. So really having a positive mindset to get through, help them be resilient, help them cope with being pregnant during a pandemic, and get through the stress that they were experiencing. So to close the study off, and what I had talked about is that it's really stressful to be pregnant in general, but having a global pandemic come out of nowhere added so much stress to the pregnancy, and this can overall be harmful to the baby. These women getting to share their story and getting to talk about their experience not only helps them get their story off their chest, but it's going to help them kind of get to talk about it and get to recognize what's going on, what's causing their stress, and finding that there are ways to cope with it. In addition, the study can give other moms who are pregnant during this pandemic or were pregnant the chance to know that they're not alone and that they have other people that they can relate to. And getting to cope with the stress, it will help the mother overall be healthier, help her family be healthier, and really give mothers a chance to relate for their experiences. So I'm really glad that I got to share this research with all of you, and I hope you enjoy my findings today. Thank you so much.